What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Joe Nissam, and with me is Mr. Raman Singh.
What's happening? What's happening?
He's got his Travolta shirt on.
My John Tro. That's right.
Oh
I tried so hard to kind of pop these calls. I'm like, man, like,
no,
you know how
man.
you could put like collar stays in
Yeah,
it? It's
no,
just
man.
like I'm like, nah, man.
I like this.
Now I'm more like in the 80s right now. Like,
I kind of like it. I mean, it's like Miami in the 80s.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
Low key, I was thinking about putting my jacket on, like my suit jacket on.
oh
And I'm like,
yeah.
you know what? Now I'm really like fitting that, that
You
persona.
full narco right here. Full narco in an 80s club.
I mean, I got the chain, I need maybe like a bracelet in my hand,
Just yeah, no one and like a pinky ring or the
Oh, and
one
a
in the
pink
yeah,
earring.
solid pinky ring. Like this guy,
Oh yeah.
this guy, he's the guy.
He knows what's up. He knows what's up. Well,
So
so Joe, I'm excited about today's discussion. I
yeah,
would love to hear what's happening today.
so this actually kind of coincides with something that I've been personally thinking about a lot as of late, um, which obviously is going to be very important in what we do, and a lot of times like disability insurance
Mm,
is a very overlooked piece of insurance because I think when we think insurance, the automatic thing that we think of is, well, I got to get obviously my basic, my health insurance and my car insurance. I got to have insurance on that stuff. And then the next tier is always life insurance, right? And when I was growing up, life insurance played a very big role in my family's finances because it was pretty much how we survived after my father passed. So I have a kind of very big affinity for life insurance because how much it did for my own family.
mm,
But then you start to become an entrepreneur, and I watched my dad go through this. My dad got sick, didn't have any kind of disability insurance, and it was a battle of trying to preserve savings. And when I started getting to a point where, okay, now my income is steady from this business, this is actually a real thing. The first thing that I did is I went out and I bought DI insurance. And I just had this conversation with my DI agent and we reviewed the policy to see if we needed to make any changes or upgrade it or so on. And I was like, man, I thank God that I know these things from CFP because I
mhm.
can actually go back and forth with this person in terms of, we were trying to decide whether we wanted to change the definition of disability, but he's like, all right, Joe, the premiums jump a lot. Is it worth it? Considering what you do. And then we were having the conversation back and forth, and we decided to make two small changes to the policy and it obviously adjusted the premium. But for CFPs, this is like a really important piece for your self employed clients, of course.
Yeah.
But for a lot of your clients, they're walking around uninsured on the biggest asset that they have, which is their paycheck.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so for a lot of us, we always think about retirement savings and putting money away and getting money in savings. But what the heck happens if you get into a car accident and you can't go to work?
Yeah.
And what if that's an extended period of time? And I think we've all heard these horror stories growing up of blah, blah, blah's mom or dad got into a car accident and they couldn't work for 2 years because it took them 2 years to recover from their injuries and they had to sell the house or they had to downsize or the other parent had to pick up a second job and it played a role in the marriage. And now you hear all these horror stories and I'm like, you know what, we got to make DI, we have to understand DI for this exam, and I'm happy that CFP emphasizes it.
Yeah.
And I
And
really,
if you think about it, Joe, the CFP exam is, and I have to tell my students this, the CFP exam is not trying to test you about your average multimillionaire client. Like, sure, it's going to test us on that, but the CFP looks at the average population in the United States, and they're like, okay, you know what? What's the common case that a CFP should be able to take care of? And a
yeah,
lot of the questions they will ask us about a husband and wife in their, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever that case is. They throw children into the equation, and hence why this is the main reason the disability insurance component is a super important part of the insurance planning side because the CFP wants you to know that, hey, are you competent enough to answer these questions and help your clients through disability insurance?
that's right. And I'll tell you, pre CFP, I don't even know anything. We were
Yeah.
never trained on it. especially working at a broker dealer. I didn't know anything about it. And when you work at a broker dealer, the average attitude around disability insurance is it's a scam. It's a
Right.
way, it's something that some insurance agent who's cold calling you is trying to sell you.
Yeah.
Then you come to learn about it in CFP and you're like, oh, whoa. Actually, I can't believe I was walking around before it.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about and you're particularly better at insurance than I am. Break down how we should prepare for DI for the CFP exam because it is an area that, when you read through a lot of the CFP review material, they'll dedicate maybe one page or maybe just a couple of paragraphs. And then you'll get a bunch of questions on it on the exam, and you're going, man, that one paragraph didn't help. So tell us
Yeah.
how you break that down. I know you have a tiered system. So break down your tier system of how you prep people or tell them to prep for this for CFP.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, Joe, what it comes down to is you want to look at the must knows to answer all of our disability questions. Like this. So this is the tier one. We're like, hey, I have to know these must knows if I want to get around any of these DI questions, whether it's through a case, whether it's like the individualized disability questions. And then we have the tier two, which people get more intimidated for is from is the tier two is basically more of like the specialized side of disability where it helps you answer some of the tougher questions of disability,
Do
right?
you
But
have to know tier one before you get to tier two?
100%. I mean,
Okay.
yes, yes, 100%. And here's why, right? The tier one, it's going to allow us to answer a lot of the low-hanging fruit on disability if we know it well enough. The tier two, if we're getting about, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, we get 10 questions on disability, right? The tier two is not going to determine whether you're going to do well in disability questions or not. It's the tier one that's going to help you determine you're going to do well in disability questions or not.
So what would you say is the breakdown between tier one and tier two? Is it more like is it an 80-20 or 50-50? Like,
Definitely not a 50-50, I would say. But if you, I mean, this is too hard for us to determine, right? Or figure out what the exact percentage would be. But if there were 10 questions, I'd say about six or seven are going to be focused more on towards tier one related questions.
so a majority.
Majority of
Absolutely
them.
a majority.
Yeah,
Okay.
majority of them
All
for
right. So
sure. Yeah.
what's inside of that tier one?
Yeah, yeah. So the base, no, these are the basics, like I say, for disability. So when I ask my students about the basics, I'm like, hey, can you tell me the definition of the disability? What's an Own Occ? What's a modified Own Occ? What's an any Occ? And understand what it really means, right? And the second thing would be is the payment structure of these policies. Okay, so it's is this person buying a policy directly from the insurance carrier, or is this person getting a free disability insurance from his employer, or is it a split cost? But then it gets a little bit more deeper about the employer. Like, is the employer like charging you somehow through a bonus, or like they're gonna structure that.
Mm.
Why, you may ask? Because it leads us to the third part, which is taxes, right? The taxes of the premium is going to help us determine the taxation of the benefits. So understand the tax realm around disability, super important, super, super, super important. And then last but not least, something basic which gets overlooked at, hence why students get it wrong, is it a guaranteed renewable, or I would say like renewals basically. Is it a guaranteed renewable? Is it a non-cancelable? What's covered under the policy? Things of that nature. So that kind of all put together I would say falls under tier one.
Okay. So let's review. First, know the definition of disability.
Yep.
Okay. What does and what each of those definitions covers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Two, who is actually paying for the premium.
Mm-hmm.
Three, how the premium dollars are taxed so we know how the actual benefit will be
Yes.
taxed.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And then four, what is the renewal of that policy, whether the premium can go up or stay the same, and whether the insurance company can just cancel the policy on you.
Right. Right.
Okay. So those are our
Absolutely.
four basic things that are going to cover a majority of the questions on the exam.
Yep. That's correct. That's correct.
What do you think the difficulty of those questions on the exam is? Like if we were looking at a scale of 1 to 5, where would you place the difficulty of majority of these questions?
Man, I think we talked about in one of our episodes about like,
Yeah.
the percentage of the
Yeah.
test, like, the weight difficulties. I would say these tier one questions are going to linger between, I'd say level two and level three. I mean, can you get a level one Sure. I mean, but I doubt the fact. I mean, if you get a level one question, consider yourself lucky. Where they say like, "Hey, what's the definition of modified, occupation?" Like, I mean, sure, you could get that, but probability is two and threes are going to be very simple, like easy.
I always find it funny because it throws people off when you get such an easy question because you're like, it can't, wait a second, this can't be this easy. Right. And to your point, if you know that definition, it allows the easy question to be an easy question, right?
100%.
All right. So now I've covered a majority of that. And let's say now I'm fluent, meaning that I know that very well and I feel good about those. I know them. Maybe I've thrown them on a flashcard. Maybe there's something in my notes that I'm reviewing on a regular basis. Once that's down, now I can move to tier two. Is that right?
Right. So, because thing is, once you understand tier one well, and you're comfortable with the concept of tier one and what's inside it, then tier two actually becomes a lot easier to study,
So what's
right?
inside of that tier two?
So in tier two, they're going to want you to know about how the supplement social insurance works, the SSI,
Mm.
right? That's a big thing because the exam's going to throw a question. It's going to say, Bobby Smith has policy, then he's going to get Social Security benefits. You got to know how the benefit reduction works, and then boom, SSI comes in. How does that work? And it's a
Okay.
you understand that better once again if you understand your definitions, and then also policy provisions, which is a nice icing on the cake. And then last but not least, you have to know how the suitability component works on these things,
Mm.
right? They're going to throw scenario-based questions your way about a surgeon, who's a heart surgeon, but goes through some sort of, disability, but they can work a regular job versus they can work, as a researcher versus they could work as a heart consultant or a primary care physician. And from there on, they're going to ask what type of definition of policy would you recommend? And
Mm.
that suitability part you could only answer those questions is if you understand your tier ones
Yeah.
and tier twos, basically.
Where would you throw the Social Security disability in? Do you throw that in tier one? Should I know that as part of my basics, or do I leave that for tier two? Because Social Security disability is kind of that weird one where
Yeah.
it's got a weird elimination period, it's got a weird definition, and they're stingy with those disability
Yeah,
dollars.
if you were to focus on the material on Social Security disability insurance itself, it's I would say definitely know the basics of it, like how long a person has to be disabled for, right, before the benefits kick in, right? Elimination period, things like that. The definition, at least have an understanding of what that definition looks like, which is pretty easy to remember. Um, but then it also kind of falls under the tier two perspective where you said it gets more complicated. So I
Mm.
would, if for Social Security disability, I would say as long as you understand the basics of Social Security disability benefits and how they get infused with your disability insurance from employer or personally owned, that should cover a lot of the grounds for Social Security disability
Okay, so
insurance.
still mainly tier one stuff.
Yes, yes,
Because it
absolutely.
still doesn't, it's still part of the normal definitions of disability. It doesn't
Right,
elude that. It's just has a different than a regular private policy.
right, right,
Okay.
exactly,
All right.
exactly.
So now when you're coming down to those suitability questions, I think that the toughest one, and tell me what you think here too, is the coordination of different policies and then obviously making that recommendation. How do we study for that?
Oh man, flashcards.
Flashcards
I
first.
mean, that's the easy answer, right? I mean,
Right.
this is something you don't just like start taking practice questions on and be like, oh, I know this stuff. You could go ahead and turn on 1,000 question test on disability insurance and take only practice questions, and you still probably won't know how it all combines together. You know, what we have talked about in the past, Joe, is understanding the material, then memorizing the material, but then application
Hmm.
in order for us to get disability questions right, we have to understand how the application of the material is involved in it, right? And how do we get to be better at application of material? It's not by just attacking a bunch of practice questions. You want to truly understand the concept and memorize the concept of those things and look at some random like, scenarios and answer those scenario-based problem-solving questions rather
Got
than
it.
just, I just answered 500 questions on disability. I should be fine.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think this is anytime that we're getting into suitability, the more that you can answer scenario questions outside of multiple choice, the better off you're going to be because you actually have to create the solution on your own.
Yeah,
And if you can do it on your own, then when it comes to multiple choice, it'll be easy. But I think you draw the important point where it still doesn't get away from our fundamentals. The more you clearly you understand your fundamentals, the easier that suitability will be.
100%.
All
And
right, so
that's why, like, I love how during our class and the material that we've designed for our students, we don't give them the crutches of just multiple choices. I mean, yeah, they get those, but we want to give them that open-ended feel of like, okay, solve this scenario.
yep.
Like use your mind with what you know rather than just kind of stay within those parameters of A, B, C, D, basically.
Yeah, and that's when students are at their best is when they're actually problem solving because it's I can't look at an answer and get a hint or a clue. And that's when things also, it's a double-edged sword because it does give you the hint or a clue, but it can also completely confuse you because it starts throwing things at you that you're unclear on.
Right.
And I think that's a really important part. So let's summarize. Tier one, know your definitions, make sure you know who's paying, how it's taxed, and the renewals.
Mhm.
And then also make sure you're kind of knowing that social security part of it as well.
Mhm.
And then the tier two, once you get that down, now move on and know all those riders, policy
Mhm.
provisions, cost of living adjustments. Um, and what was the other one that you had said? Oh,
SSI, the
SSI, the
social
SSI.
insurance. Yeah.
And then once that's down, now this makes the suitability even easier.
Yep.
Yep. All right. I love that breakdown. Fantastic breakdown for you guys who are taking CFP and an easy way to really kind of roadmap your study plan here because it can be very easy to go backwards, trying to do the suitability first before you have your definitions down and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, great outline for you guys. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, reach out to Raman and myself, and we will see you guys on our next episode. Take it easy, everybody.